Okay, Master Mason note. So I remember on my first A1 Swag Incorporated, it wound up being kind of a local militia build. I had the military Joint Chief of Staff written in there word for word, picked out gemstones, pretty much the whole thing. How I wanted that to my local journal, local region topography, how I was locally thinking about it. Obviously, running into that Sun Tzu stacked up with job applications and one half to the written names, numbers, timelines, and systems to names, numbers, terms, adjusted systems into X1, NM, M1, M2, NM systems because I had three variables, but compressed. I started to compress what the one megabyte is for the 100K 100 application of the environment of this would be. And this is important to the college class that I'm presenting in a local militia field, whether it be in the stone mill or we just running units, and I'm talking about the W boson that is Walgreens and Hancock, giving the topology of how I'd keep that local net running through the school, the Hydron Collider that is the football field, and that hill they got out back that I love. Plus the one we're going to run 5 miles on for the differential, what the training timeline is, what the boxes and their useful pieces given the entropy of the geometric form, topology. Hancock School, given the boxes and resources and timelines equally to Hancock, gives you shopping numbers, food numbers. Walgreens has the facility or the pharmacy close local. You want to have that lined up with G, because local militias running through. You want them to come through there, have a safe transportation route hubbed on side of those systems for local resources and players, so that way it's easier for a transition on that with local transmissions that are mainlined application, Sun Tzu, transposition codes, Monty Poly, Caesar ciphers for the complex that is the working joules and gravitational dark matter singularities, the X's, the ones, the twos, the marshmallow experiment that defines the line between 0 and 1 and 0, the end of that step, which could be 2, 10, infinity, numbers of steps or dimensions or processes or parallel frames that explain the monkey smashing their face off the typewriters for who the bell tolls instead of Shakespeare.
That's why I can't take this job.
Van Ash manuscript on some of these. And inside of that, again, you begin to build that local thesis. There's lots of variations on the code dynamics of what transposition forms the local sharps entropy given salty forms. And obviously, we're trying to build a bit of both of that, a quantum operator as a unit in the Bluestone Masons division of this local militia. This is the goal and the function. We'll teach a lot about the ATT as long as gravity's providing that for us. Somebody's going to have something in here. You will be the resident expert given the curve of this class, the grade of this rock, situation and timelines as Master Masons, and how to determine that grade in the future based on the standards of the square, the level, the plumb bob, whatever it takes. They're all increments of one dimensions that form the same calculation in a different topology, cosmetology, dimension, reality, multi-world, universal principle. Those models transposition very well in code type sequences and engineering forms where that's applied correctly given the wave function of what that system may represent. As a group, the noting skill of that is most important over that system. Sometimes that becomes active in that form, drill sergeant watching privates, and sometimes IMA at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier running them saws at the back end of an 8, 10 hour, 12 hour day, units of a soldier private in boot camp with sleep time, private time, right time, weekend time, holiday time, all the time, all the time. because it's going to come around, you're going to have problems. I'm going to tell you to write a letter to your senator and tell them to fix it, or once you write those problems down, you'll see what the limits on those situations are, how they best resonate inside that marshmallow, and what the effects will be in the future. Therefore, how to gauge a larger entropy and a larger horizon for that Epson sphere, which might give you enough calculations to determine a wider margin of the little blue flame on the rocket, how far, how fast, how long, and therefore actually be able to reach that end goal at some point. The mission parameters of those things not only are training standards of what they do in the command directive and how that applies inside of the system, they also reflect the aspect of the internal masses, X and Y, of that hydrogen, helium, oxygen, carbon, or anything else that's metal on the periodic table given the solution in action, or acid test. U being that acid test correlates to particles and models that work on different forms but apply to the same physics and stoichiometry, gas ratio, Euler's number, and time dilating paradoxes, and the way to show you a Mythbusters blowing off the top of some sewer caps with a bunch of junk in there and blowing up an AR-15 in a dark room on the last day of your training before you graduate as a group, where you should all know how to be able to fold your rack back up, put all the stuff back in your bag in this sealed facility where we hold Cobras, and be able to find every screw as a unit and put it together in a dark room with no lights and no door. Right? And what it'll teach you is, I'm telling you out there, a lot about gravity, whether this is a one-person event or an entire group, 2 people, 10 people, 50 people, pull it together. How does it work? What is the end result? Can it be quantified once, 10 times, 15 times as a training unit, or just in a way that applies the system on the entropy of another form? Sharps would define that model as an idealistic system of socialism that defines what America is when I apply Sharps in here, or excuse me, Old Salty, and taking on World War II and some kid on the internet about what the system is 83 across the board and the end result to the system. Bluestone is socialist in the fact that it's a rock that applies to the quantum level and the function, but it explains these rules specifically. Any unit category system defines that weight on a string that will turn on a light by the gear forces that form the net model of the working joules in this radiant. And that radiant is a straight line by graphical systems, turned on, turned off. If you come back and hit this, it'll be a dynamic system within that entropy as long as you are acting inside of that radiant on a timeline, and that's operational. That's to say, you might miss that sequence while turning saws, burning rocks, trying to do the double, triple quintilla on the saw system that day, running fork trucks, dumping dumpsters, helping other crew cleaning. The links, it's a straight line. Inside of here, that'll be kind of the momentum in turn that goes away from this here in this kind of situation. I like to again use the sexual behavioral model in Stanford as the example. You hear me often talk about bipolar, that is necessary, the akadasia, manic bipolar systems that define everything this wave function can express in a timeline of teaching this example in one marshmallow. One XYZ wave functioning Lorentzian system from your topology, defining this as A and B and C correlating to A that is B, A that is, B that is C, till you get to Z, and the system adjusts over A to Z inside of the entire dynamics of the full entropy of the state, even if it's limited by some form of physics that would cut off a timeline, a defined model of that physics in that calculus form, not necessarily defined by the numbers in the brackets that's standard, but in terms of that other form that represents itself to the true limitation of the air acoustic flutter on the floor of a screw bolt and serviceability maintenance timelines that would properly link that system, asteroids, player, going through one frame, out the next, through the system on those types of Toro-space universes, HTT, M1, M2. Yes, that could be the form of the Big Bang and how it expressed itself in physics mathematically to the general limitations of what that system represents. However, this is the physical form in its entirety, and anything that we can do is Planck's chaos to the shortest limit that defines what entropy is by integrating a cleaner state or a timeline that limits it to other adjustable systems to say it was this, but that same application is the fine screaming fish little gorilla problem and explaining to you having the same calculations later that A and B in this code at this time would reference a gravity calculation that is both local and not local if you do not understand the mechanics. Here, that mechanics is things like Schrödinger, Nova-Stroker's air turbulence equation, Feynman's diagrams, and how you have to adjust yourself as one of those diagrams, passing energy through, having effect inside of the gluon, Corky, lepton bits of the calculus models to deform what speed it was that negative out that calc, determine what mass it was to make sure the feeds and speeds on the EM noise correctly dialed in to be able to pass that thing through and hold it in a tank in EM fields of supercooled variations on what that does, which is the stone mill cranking rock to make sure all the pressure and everything is square. Superconductors, YCBOs, your body can't operate, are a supercooling model that define the temperature and that entropy of the vacuum that is the stone mill to be 0 Kelvin. When I frame those out inside of the mass gaps and timelines of wiggly squiggly lines to correlate the numbers x and y on the graph of this map on an overhead scaled parallaxing effect of M1, M2, M3 and the turbulent flow of that little doomslayer screaming fish. Super speed, you got, because of science here, I'm going to use his reference and how he's been doing it. He brings up a couple with it, and that super speed that comes with that from gravity here, the math will have causal zero net force to resist that standard in the command directive, but the actual graphene filter of the calculus variations and the mountain that's behind that gets blown out. Doomslayer kind of numbers on that. Yep. First sergeant's up your ass. Tone, charm, track the light. What's all that put together in one word? Put on a list. Part of it was known, part of it was not known. The known knowns and the known unknowns are become the knowns inside of what that standard does. And anybody standing on here, I will throw you under the bus at CNN in a heartbeat if you do not understand. We should anyways, just to be clear.
Stunning Entertainment Center.
Got you on next one.